a show where we examine modern marriage from every angle, including our own relationship. I'm Allison Raskin. I'm a New York Times bestselling author, relationship coach, and mental health advocate who forced my husband to do this show with me.
And I'm John Blakesley, who recently collapsed or almost collapsed on a tennis court because I was so exhausted.
Oh, did you really almost?
Almost. I pushed it a little too hard. And since I'm just getting back into it now, I thought I was going to have to vomit in a trash can. But then I was okay.
Good. You shouldn't push yourself that hard.
I got to push myself. I got to win.
That's funny because I thought about doing a marriage moment this week, but it wasn't substantial enough, which was when you came home from playing tennis with my dad and you were like, yeah, I kept my cool. I didn't get too upset. And then it was it came out, you had thrown your racket.
I'm a pretty even keel guy, but the tennis court is a special place where, sometimes you work out some things. And it's also a very infuriating sport.
I just think that a lot of people that know you pretty well, but not all the way, would be surprised by who you become when you have a racket of some kind in your hand.
I'm a fiercely, fiercely competitive, kind of mean guy.
Yeah, you shout a lot. You're very rude to yourself.
Yes.
And it's kind of scary. Anyway. We have a sociological episode for everyone today. We are going to be interviewing historian Stephanie Coontz about the problematic history of marriage, but also the exciting potential for the future.
She's amazing. And Allison has a crush on her?
I just want to be her. What's that called?
Okay. I see. You don't want to be with her. You just want to inhabit who she is and become her.
Yeah, if I could leave behind the legacy she's leaving behind, I'd feel like I had a life really well lived.
That's incredible. Yeah, she's fantastic.
And I'm also, I have to go on the record as saying, quite PO'd that right now both dogs are with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And you smirked at me and you're rubbing it in.
Yeah. Look, marriage is a patriarchal institution, and our canine children understand that. So they're with the big dog over here.
I want a divorce. But before we dive into all of that, we have got to do everyone's favorite segment, Marriage Moments TM. Do 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 do.
So that sounded like it could have been like a early take at the Mission Impossible theme.
Thank you.
Very early.
Wow, thank you so much.
Like an executive was like, it could be like do 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 do. and then the composer was like, okay, I guess that's what I got to work on.
And then they turned it into
something great. And then that executive went around town for years later and was like, I came up with the Mission Impossible theme at parties and stuff.
I think if you did that, though, you could kind of claim that a little bit. You could say, I contributed to the Mission Impossible theme.
You could say that, no, you really can't.
You were part of the process. You sparked that fire.
But what a, just, all right, read your marriage moment.
So being pregnant, we have talked quite a bit about my vomiting on this show.
Right.
But we haven't
more than the audience definitely bargained for.
But this week I thought it would only be fair in our egalitarian marriage for me to talk about you vomiting. So I want to take us back a few Christmas Eves ago.
Oh my God. I forgot about this, yeah.
So we had a dinner of linguine and clams.
My favorite, one of my favorites.
And then we went to stay at a hotel near your parents' house where we had the dinner.
Mm-hmm.
The dogs are with us. It's a very lovely hotel right on the ground floor where you can kind of walk out onto a deck.
Mm-hmm.
It's the middle of the night. You suddenly jump out of bed.
Yeah.
And go, I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Right.
And I said, but you're talking.
Not helpful. Or comforting.
Well, it was comforting because it was a reminder that you could breathe.
It didn't feel comforting.
then you start pacing back and forth.
Uh-huh.
And then I guess you realize you're nauseous. But instead of going into the bathroom to throw up in the toilet or the sink, you go outside.
Yeah.
You go outside to the little deck area.
Uh-huh.
And then you throw up in a bush.
Yeah.
At this very nice hotel.
And it was a hedge of sorts. And it was a really lovely, well-manicured hedge. And I vomited all over it.
It was just such a funny moment of like, what does your partner do in a crisis? Or like when they're in a panic?
It was awful. So I woke up. I had been reading a spooky book.
Oh yeah, you were reading like The Haunting on Hill House?
Yeah, something like that. And I was reading this spooky book, and like it was like demons were possessing people or something, or ghosts were, I don't really know. And then suddenly I can't breathe in the middle of the night. And I get up and I guess you're right, I talked. So I guess I was able to like push air out.
When you're choking, you can't make any sounds.
It just felt like I could not breathe.
I'm sorry.
So I don't really know what in fact was happening, but the sensation in my body was that I was no longer capable of breath. Okay. And so then I started pacing in a panic.
Yeah.
And so that's part of what led me outside.
Right.
Was to somehow see if that air,
I could breathe that air better, yeah.
Yeah. Which was really strategic and smart of me.
It's not terrible thinking. I mean, people go,
yeah.
I need some fresh air.
Right, I need fresh air.
Right.
Maybe the air in here, maybe we were being cut off from oxygen. And I figured it out before you did. And so I'll go outside, I'll break into outside, and I'll get the fresh air, and then we won't suffocate, and I saved the whole family. Mm-hmm. So that's where kind of my head was, because I was really cool and calm under pressure. And then I vomited in the bush. And it was, it was some linguine and clams that I think I guess it seems like maybe the clams were bad. Maybe they were spoiled.
Yeah. I think that was the only time you vomited in our almost 4.5 year relationship.
Yeah.
And did you do it with gusto?
Wow. On Christmas Eve, no less.
Yeah.
Yeah. Festive.
But then you felt better.
I did. The next day I was fine.
But we didn't tell them about the vomit.
We didn't?
No, I don't think so.
I thought I told them the next day.
You did?
Because clearly this was my mother's fault. Like,
No, you didn't tell the hotel about the vomit.
Oh, the hotel. Yeah. Yeah, we did not tell them about that. And we didn't get charged for it, so.
Pretty cool.
Pretty cool. All right, so here's my marriage moment. It's a moment about me.
All right.
Is that okay?
I guess. It's not really the parameters of marriage moment TM.
It always has to be about you.
Well, I don't. How is that a marriage moment then?
All right. Well, let me do it, and then you can tell me. Okay.
Okay.
So this is a marriage moment TM that Allison's not involved in at all. If you were hoping I was going to say something kind of cute or fun about Allison, forget it. She's not even a supporting character.
This happened before we met.
So Allison's father, Ken Raskin. Ken, if you're listening, hey. If you're not listening, what the heck? He's a man who loves to purchase real estate.
Yes.
He's always purchasing real estate. Okay? And sometimes he's purchasing real estate so fast that he can't really be there to buy or look at the property, right? And so one day he was really interested in this property. I think it might even be the Playa Vista place that he wound up getting. And so he asked me, because he needed to show that he was interested and he was serious about it, he asked me to go with his realtor and for me to pretend like I was Ken Raskin.
Uh-huh.
And so I showed up, and the story was that I was Ken Raskin and that I was M&S attorney, whatever. What was
he was an ERISA
attorney, who was interested in buying this property, and the other realtor was going to show me around. And so I was pretending like, yeah, I know my wife hasn't seen it yet. Yeah, we live in New York, etc. And so I pretended to be your dad.
This isn't a marriage moment.
Yeah, I think it absolutely is, and let me explain why.
Okay.
Because One, it happened while we were married. Two, a marriage is not just about you and me. It's about this like familial connection and like this connection where I have been so close with your father that I got to pretend to be him for an afternoon and ask questions and stuff.
Did you do his mannerisms?
Absolutely.
No, you didn't.
Talked a lot about my fantasy baseball team. I asked,
sneezed really loud.
Yeah, I asked for a sparkling water, but then only drank a little bit of it and then returned the entire thing to the fridge.
That's less weird than when he drinks almost his entire glass of mango juice and leaves behind
The
one
tiny
sip,
bit, yeah, one
and
sip.
then puts that in the fridge.
Yeah, so anyway, so I was Ken Raskin for a day and introduced myself and talked like I was Ken Raskin.
Where was I?
I think you were home or you were doing something else. Your mom got a huge kick out of this. Your mom loved, she's like, what was it like to be Ken Raskin?
But isn't it like then confusing if he had made an offer that had clearly been a lie?
Well, I don't know if they necessarily, I don't know. They just wanted me to go and project strength as Ken Raskin. I suppose that if like the application came in or something like that and it said his birthday on it, they'd be like, man, that guy looks terrific for.
Well, then you have to then deal with the person. It would be
I don't
clear
think so.
that it was a ruse.
What do you mean? You're dealing with a realtor.
Oh, all right. Very cool. You sneaked by the parameters.
I think it counts.
Okay, listeners, let us know if you think that counts.
Allison had nothing to do with it. She doesn't even remember it.
I wasn't there.
But it was me and my in-laws having a huge laugh about me pretending to be Ken Raskin.
Speaking of listeners, it's time for our listener-submitted Marriage Moment TM. And this is a very adorable one, and I deeply relate to it. Our listener writes, my wife and I always give each other a kiss on the lips and say I love you before she leaves for work while I work from home. One day she was rushing out the door and I was downstairs to kiss her goodbye. She said, I love you, kissed me, pulled back, and said, I love you too. I was very confused for a second and then started laughing hysterically. She was confused at what I was laughing at. I told her that she had just completed our whole interaction by herself and that she told herself she loved herself before I could even say anything. Once I told her, she started laughing too, of course. She completely did not recognize what she did at first, which made it even funnier. It's a marriage moment TM that I regularly remember and chuckle, so I thought it'd be perfect to share.
That's terrific. You would do this.
Didn't I do that on my birthday? Where you said happy birthday, we kissed, and then I said happy birthday to you or something like that.
Yeah. That is such a you moment.
Definitely. You know, and sometimes you have to complete the call and response yourself if you're left hanging.
How often are you completing call and responses yourself?
Every now and then. I do have a lot. I do require a lot of
so many call and responses. So many.
Yeah, we did one today. I said, a woof woof here.
And a woof woof there.
Here's a woof.
There's a woof.
Everywhere's a...
I want a divorce. Yeah, you sing a lot. You want me to fill in the song and whatever. Or you just, yeah, absolutely. For a while, we would clap when the dryer was done.
We should keep doing that.
Yeah, I did it the other day and you didn't do it.
Oh, man.
You know, because the dryer does that little song, you know,
it's a
where
nice song.
It's so
Live
happy
music.
that it's over. And so you want to applaud for it to let it know it did a good job. And so it doesn't get discouraged.
What was the thing I was doing before I would go to bed for a while about Alibaba? What was it?
Oh yeah.
Say goodnight.
Allison was totally for like months. She would. This is how she wanted us to go to bed. Like most couples say, kiss each other and say "I love you." She would say loudly, "Good night to me, the Alibaba," and then she would not go to bed until I repeated, "Good night to you, the Alibaba." That's so bizarre. And like felt like a weird power move. Who is the Alibaba? And like if I didn't respond because I was like reading or doing something else and I was like, maybe she'll just like finally let this thing go, she would just say, "Good night to me, the Alibaba. Good night to me, the Alibaba." And the only way I could get it to stop was by saying, good night to you, the Alibaba. and then she would go, "Thank you," and go to sleep. And that's how we would say goodnight to each other.
Oh, I gotta bring that back.
No. So bizarre. Where did you even get that? Why would you call yourself the Alibaba?
So deeply satisfying every night. Welcome back to Starter Marriage. It's time to pop the question. This is the part of the show where we deep dive into the main topic of the episode with an incredible guest. And this week, we are joined by Stephanie Coontz, the Director of Research and Public Education at the Council on Contemporary Families and a Professor Emerita at the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington. She has authored 7 books on the history and contemporary sociology of marriage and family, and her latest book, For Better and Worse, The Problematic Past and Challenging Future of Marriage, will soon be published by Viking Penguin. When I was researching for my book, I feel like Evergreen College popped up all the time as having great research on this stuff.
Well, that's very nice.
So, I feel like marriage is something that we've all really kind of taken for granted as we know it today, but it's changed a lot. I kind of want to start with the softball question of when did marriage begin? When did humans start buying into this?
Well, we don't know exactly, but it appears that marriage began as a way not so much of uniting two people who loved each other as a way of reaching out beyond your individual love relationship to connect with other families, to make families. In fact, one of the things I say is that marriage was probably invented to get in-laws.
Yes.
Nowadays we complain about our in-laws, but that was the whole point of marriage in all of the foraging, the early kind of societies that seem to have bear the closest resemblance to our Stone Age ancestors tend to have marriages that are based on the idea that you connect with a whole lot of other people. It makes you have obligations. In fact, their definition of in-laws are much larger than ours. It's not just your husband's brother, but your husband's brother's sister's husband, so it makes these connections and obligations that allow people to share and cooperate. And for thousands of years, that's what it was about. And then we invented patriarchy, so to speak. And as societies got more complex and there began to be property to defend or to war against, the division of labor between men and women was not because women were weaker, but they were less mobile because they nursed and for years. So men tended to do the far-flung hunting, and when you got into raiding and wars, it was men who tended to do that. And as a result, they gained access to new resources, they gained power, and they began to use women to improve their own labor force, not just to expand it. And at that point in history, marriage changed completely. But societies that became unequal in that way started making sure that you married not out of the group to expand your connections, but in the group to make sure you concentrated resources and denied connections to other people. So one of the reasons that so many people say marriage is oppressive is because, in fact, for the next 10,000 years, it was. But that's not how it originated. And I'm quite optimistic that it doesn't have to be that way. But we still have a lot of baggage that we have to watch in order to, or get rid of, if we want to build the egalitarian marriages that I think most of us would like to have today.
And so when do you see the switch from thinking about marriage for political or economic reasons to marriage as fulfillment, marriage for love?
Well, I think people have always dreamed of marrying for love, but it was considered a very dangerous idea for a long time.
Yeah.
And also just not something you were going to be allowed to do. If you're the upper classes, they would stop you. From the lower classes, if you weren't marrying someone that could help with the farm and that your parents approved of, they weren't going to give you a dowry if you're a woman or a piece of the land.
Right.
So for a long, long time, people kind of fantasized about marrying for love, but the received opinion was you should marry someone you could learn to love, if at all possible. Now, the upper classes often ignored that when money was involved. But the main thing is you wanted to marry somebody who could be a fellow laborer, because the household was the center of production. And it was only in the I think the 18th century that you began to get the idea, as wage labor developed and there were more democratic political institutions being played with, that maybe young people could go out and make their own choices for themselves, and it ought to be based on the basis of love. But that was a radical idea until the end of the 18th century.
And I think something that was confusing to me when I was trying to do, research around this was, in today's society, religion and marriage feel very connected, but that's not historically been the case, right? Like, the religious component of marriage in some of the major religions kind of came in later. Can you speak to that at all?
Well, I mean, it's quite interesting. If you a lot of most religions have mandated certain kinds of marriages, but what is interesting about Christianity in its early years was that it did not think marriage was the ideal state at all. The idea was that the best way was to be celibate and participate in building the early Christian community of fellow believers, not to adjust yourself and commit yourself to just one person in this, what they thought of as a selfish way. In the 4th century, there was a monk who started to say that if we got married, that was just as good as staying celibate and single. And they pronounced it, the reigning pope called a synod, and that was pronounced a heresy, and he and the monks who believed it were expelled and banished to these different islands. And really, for the next several centuries, it was just a heresy to say that it was as good to be married as it was to be single and celibate. It's only in the 12th century that marriage was made a sacrament in the Christian church. And so I think people have this really strange idea about how much marriage was valued by the early Christians.
Yeah, no one ever taught me that in Catholicism. I remember in Catholic school, at least, I remember there being an ascetic movement that was like very tied up with like denying yourself. But that's interesting. I didn't realize it was that late that it became a sacrament.
Well, yeah, and people the idea was that if you're going to have sex and be dirty like that, you better be married.
Right.
But the highest ideal of morality was to remain single. In fact, I just discovered the other day a letter from Saint Jerome, I believe it was, saying to women that if you got widowed, don't get married again, like a dog returning to his vomit.
I think modern feminists could take that up today.
That's so funny. Well, if our dogs are any indicator, Phantom returns to his vomit much more than Sugar. And historically, marriage has benefited men much more than women. So it makes sense.
Oh, man.
And I think something that has really shifted recently is like we interestingly went clearly from marriage being something that Christianity wasn't even pushing to then becoming the pinnacle of human existence, right? Like for a very long time, the only way to feel like you were an adult in society, the only way to move forward with major milestones for women to have any kind of sense of adulthood outside of their family of origin was to be married. And then at a certain point, I'd say in the last couple of decades, that has shifted somewhat significantly, where it's not a level playing field, but it is no longer a marking of a social pariah not to be married. And I'm wondering what you can attribute to that shift.
Well, a whole bunch of things. First of all, as part of it is because as people got more educated, and women particularly began to get educating, they began to delay marriage. As women entered the workforce, they began to be able to support themselves. And those changes interacted with a changing cultural climate and greater acceptance of premarital and then non-marital sex, to create a situation where people didn't have to marry, and you could see that they could build worthwhile lives without something that had been forgotten for a while by the Christians who originally said that that was true, that you could build a worthwhile life without it. And so all of those things have produced a situation where you no longer have to get married, but most people still want to get married. The majority of people still, and they value marriage. You know, there's this nonsense that goes around that people don't respect marriage anymore. Actually, we have much higher expectations of marriage
Yeah.
than people did of the past. And because we have those high expectations, we are much more scornful and disapproving of marriages where the vows are whether people lie to each other or cheat or unfair to each other or are unequal. And because of that, we are more accepting of non-marriage or divorce. So it's exactly because we actually value marriage as a relationship so much that we no longer insist upon it as an institution.
I love that.
That's great. Listening to you talk throughout the history of marriage, it seems marriage is so tied up in class. And we were talking about whether you're the upper class, you have certain expectations of marriage. The lower class had different expectations of marriage. Some people today look at marriage as like a class symbol. Like if you have enough money and you have your life together enough that you can get married. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the role you see that class has today in our modern society.
Well, I think that people get the connection completely wrong a lot of the time. A lot of the pro-marriage advocates who insist that marriage is going to be the best thing that ever happened to you, and that it's the only way you can raise civilized children, and it's the only way that you can make money yourself and be happy. They're always saying that, oh, poor people just don't understand that if they would just get married, they would be happier and they would be able to, support themselves better. It's a route to wealth and security. The problem is that yes, it is if it works.
Right.
And the problem is that we want marriage to work in a much deeper way than ever before. You no longer can the man can just say, this is what you have to do, woman, in order for me to support you. No longer do you get refused jobs if you're not married or if you're divorced. So it's possible now to live a life outside marriage. Many people want a marriage or marriage-like relationship, but they're not willing to settle for one that doesn't confer those benefits. And this is where the class thing comes back in a very different way. We expect so much of marriage today that it expects much more of us as individuals. And we have to have the patience, we have to have the ability to work together. We no longer work in a household where everyone depends on the other one. You can earn wages separately, so you have to have someone who will earn wages separately or who will do their share of not earning the wages in a way that works, and the one who earns the wages will share it more equitably than in the past. So we expect all of these things, and as a result, people are not willing to get married unless they have both the economic and the emotional down payment to make it work. And it takes more work to make it work. It works better when it works, but it takes more work. That's an awful lot of works in a sentence.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I think that the best version of the future is less people get married, but the people that do get married, the quality is higher, right?
Well, and in fact, the divorce rate has been falling.
I know.
And that's because I think marriage is getting more selective. The bad side of it is that we are living in a society, particularly here in America, where the living conditions and working conditions of people who don't start off with enough money to get a good education or to get a good start from their parents are insecure. They don't have they have fewer vacation days than Europeans. They have lower wages. There's more income inequality. And the result is that life is very stressful, and stress undermines any relationship.
Yeah.
There are studies that show that when couples are financially stressed, they begin to react more negatively to each other. They attribute malevolent emotions behind mistakes that happen, rather than saying, okay, I'm sure that was an accident. You would never do that. They don't have the patience and attention that it takes to keep a marriage going. And so I think people get it exactly the wrong way when they say, well, if everybody would get married, we'd have a much better economy. If we had a much better economy, more people would be willing to get married and be able to sustain it.
That's going to be our merch. We got to put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, no, I mean, you kind of anticipated a question I had, which was like, do you think the marriage rate would go up if like the income of non-college educated men wasn't stagnating? If we wanted to create more marriages or make it more accessible to people, is to focus less on marriage-centered policy and focus more on like lifting up the lower and middle classes of the United States so that they can have that opportunity to marry?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that what we need is better work opportunities, better working conditions, because we know the research is overwhelming that insecure jobs, poor jobs, stressful jobs tend to, again, undermine people's ability to sustain healthy relationships and healthy communication. Not everybody's still going to get married, but you're much more likely to have, say, the Nordic idea that even if you don't get married, you act like you're married because you have more calm relationships, less instability, less turnover. And I think that, rather than the marriage license, is the key that we want people to have. So to my mind, that's a win-win situation. If we could improve the employment situation, reduce the inequality, improve the working conditions for Americans, I think you would have more people able to sustain stable relationships. And also, those people who don't enter them or do end up in a bad relationship would also be able to live outside in a productive way. And if they have a child, be able to raise that child more better than under these tremendously stressful conditions that so many Americans have to live in right now.
I'm curious why, I guess just speaking to America for now, the government is so pro-marriage. And do you find that to be nefarious in any way?
Well, as a historian, you always try not to attribute, bad, purposeful motives. But I have to say that sometimes I am tempted to, because so much of the pro-marriage thing seems to me to be pro-marriage advocacy.
Right.
Seems to me to be a substitute for social and economic reform. It's like we don't have to do anything about the minimum wage. We don't have to do anything about our social safety net. If we would just get everybody married, then everything would be fine. And that turns out to be just wrong. And I think that it does become a little nefarious when it becomes a substitute for discussing other social and economic reforms.
Well, also because it feels like it's always wrapped up in this like nostalgia for like 1950s America, where everyone has a family, there's a white picket fence, the wife stays at home, the man works, everyone is white, in this vision, everyone is white. Yeah.
And infanticide rates are higher.
Right.
Domestic abuse is stronger. Child abuse is not recognized.
Right.
Men, there's no such thing as marital rape, because if a woman is raped by her husband, that doesn't count. She just owes him sex, whether he takes it violently or not. Yeah, sure. So that's what comes with the golden age of the 50s and 60s. Now, I understand why people are nostalgic for it, but they're nostalgic for exactly the wrong things. It's exactly what you were talking about. That was a time period when workers' wages were rising. There was still inequality, but it was narrowing, and you could actually see progress being made. The inequality was much lower than it is today. So you could see people thinking, okay, we have a better future, and we can build on that. So that's what people should be nostalgic for. But instead, the very people who want us to go back, who say that getting married will solve all the problems, want to repeal all the reforms of the New Deal that created that progress.
Right.
I know one of the most shocking things was how recently marital rape became recognized in all 50 states. I believe up until the 1990s, it wasn't recognized throughout the country.
Not until I think the 92 or 93 were the last two states that made it illegal.
And to me, that is such a heavy legacy. And I wonder, how do we begin with that kind of history to look at marriage as anything other than inherently patriarchal?
Well, as someone who studied some anthropology and knows some of the research that goes on about how foraging societies worked, they seem much less male dominant than ours. There may have been wife beating in some circumstances, but you had women fighting back and they could leave. Divorce is accepted. So I don't believe that there is any inherent reason for marriage to be so oppressive. But for a lot of historical reasons that we talked about a little bit at the beginning, of males being the ones who had access to new wealth as societies got wealthy, and they could prey on other people. And not every society became exploitative, but the ones that did were the ones that wiped out the peaceful ones. And those were the ones where men had a bigger and bigger incentive to privatize the labor of their wives and of their children. And yes, there's been a long, long legacy of it. But, we've made some real progress. And what we have to do, I think, is just be aware of constantly in my new book, I talk about the earworms that we've inherited, about what's a male entitlement, what's a female, what makes females attractive to men, what makes males attractive to females. We've inherited all of these things, and they just buzz in our head, and we have to stop for a minute so that we really rethink what it means to have an egalitarian romantic relationship. There's things we can learn from same-sex couples on that that are very interesting, because they don't bring the same kind of sexist stereotypes. When they divide the housework, they don't say, well, a woman, of course, mops the floor and she does the laundry, and the man, of course, does this, because there's either two women or two men, so they've got to divide it up more equally, or in terms of who likes to do what, or trade it off. And all of those things seem to have a tremendously good effect on heterosexual relationships when they take the same time and trouble.
I know some research suggests that just the mere act of getting married tends to make people fall more into traditional gender roles, even if they had been cohabitating before. Like, once you enter the marriage steps, suddenly your relationship in heterosexual couples becomes more gendered.
Yes, I think that's true, although there's some new research suggesting that it really now doesn't really kick in until the baby arrives. And then it kicks in with
It's coming for us, John.
that it's easier to make those changes when you don't have a third party, so to speak,
Right.
that is quite disruptive in your life. But yes, there are studies that show that in relationships, there is this expectation that women feel, and that men do too, that women will take on more of these kinds of not only the mundane housekeeping tasks, but the emotional tasks of keeping the relationship going. So that's something that couples need to be very aware of when they go into a relationship, to make sure, are we falling into the pattern so that we're trying to live like our parents or grandparents in ways that we really don't want to live. We need to discuss this.
Thinking about the origins of marriage, when you were talking about creating people getting married to create connections, and then it became about creating in-groups. And today we're trying to create this more egalitarian marriage institution or dating institution, but yet so many people, when they're on Tinder or Hinge or whatever, tend to approve of people who are like them. I think there was a great hope that we would see a lot more people dating between different religions, different races, different socioeconomic statuses, because, what does it matter on when you're swiping through Tinder? But then it turns out that no, actually people kind of tend to go for what their in-group looks like. I'll just admit personally, since we admit a lot of things on this show, that I think I would have struggled to be in a relationship with someone without a college education. And that's kind of a classist, I guess, thing of mine. My mother didn't have one. My father did. I don't know. I didn't come from, a relationship where they both had one, but I think that would have been a hang up for me. And what that does is that potentially prevents all kinds of relationships I could have had, all kinds of relationships many people could have had. And so I wonder, though, that if this egalitarianism that we are striving for and this flattening in our society just keeps popping up in all of these insidious and now masked ways behind our technology or what have you. And how do you think we should be thinking about breaking down those biases and to create, is it a policy question? Is it just a question of personal character? How do you think about that?
Oh, that's a gigantic question, which I wish I knew the answer. I want to sidestep it just a little bit, because
Please.
You make the point that it used to be that marriage was a way of making connections. And I think the points you raise are really important, and we can come back to them. But the other problem that I think that we see right now is that many people see marriage as a way of cocooning, that they go in with each other, that married couples spend less time interacting with friends and family and coworkers. And I think that it's extremely important, both for the marriage and for our society, to make sure that you continue relationships you've had that might not lead to marriage, and therefore maybe you don't have the same criteria of how much you have in common. I know when my husband and I got married, we actually made a statement that we were inviting these people to be part of our expanded network, that each of us had brought friends and family that didn't know each other before, and we hoped that would help them connect with each other, not with us. And then when our son got married, they did the sweetest things. Instead of having us parents give the bride away or the groom away or either, they gave their parents away to each other.
Oh,
isn't that sweet?
That's amazing.
That's so lovely.
I'll take a stab at sort of what you were saying, John. And first of all, I'd want to say thank you for reading my book, because some of the questions you've asked, it makes me very clear that you actually paid attention to I think, and really took in the lessons.
Absolutely. If I was going to read one book on marriage, with all due respect, Stephanie, I had to read my wife's book. Otherwise, I'd get into huge trouble. But I promise I'll read a few more for you.
Because that's something I explore, is that there was this expectation with dating apps that suddenly people would be dating outside of their normal circle because they now have access to people that are different than them. But in reality, because you can make all of these, all of these metrics of I'm only looking for this, I'm only looking for that, you ended up much more with like finding like. And I guess to me, there's a difference between having an expectation of egalitarian marriage where inside the marriage, the two people are equal versus expecting people from completely different backgrounds and cultures and belief systems to be compatible. Like, I do think there is an inherent thing that there are certain things that you're already, no matter who you marry, you're in an intercultural relationship with them simply by the fact that you're from two different families. I mean, every family has its own culture. And I think that sometimes the more big differences you add can be challenging. So, like, I think there are plenty of people out there that, like, come from completely different socioeconomic backgrounds. I mean, my mom and my dad did. I think that there are plenty of people out there that have different religious backgrounds. We do. But I do think that the idea that anyone should be compatible with anyone is maybe a really big ask. And it's kind of about, like, knowing yourself and what are the things you can be different from your spouse on and what are the things that really don't work for you in that way.
Yeah, that's interesting because I just to jump in real quick, like, I wonder if I'm thinking about it in a way that the people who fetishize the 1950s do, where it's like thinking of marriage as social engineering, like, right, where I'm like, where I can make a better, more equitable society and redistribute wealth in some more equitable way through marriage, when in fact, like, that's not the role maybe it should be serving in society.
Well, I think that yeah, I think you both make really good points here. But the thing that we want to remind people is that when you say you'd like to marry someone with a college education, really what you're doing is a shortcut for saying you want to marry somebody who has interests and skills or capacities that you find of interest. And sometimes people without a college degree have that.
Absolutely.
So so often we use on these apps, we try to get at similarities we want by using very, very superficial markers. What is the occupation? Do they have a high occupation status? I notice it a lot in my life since we're talking about marriages. I have a higher occupational status than my husband. And so when I would tell people, when I was a full-time professor, a book author, and what does your husband do? I would say, well, he works for the airlines, and they would immediately assume he was a pilot. Because that was the equivalent of professor, whereas he wasn't. He was just a customer service agent. Of course, he was one who could also speak 3 languages and talk, so although he doesn't have the same higher education as I do, he knows so much that I'm continually impressed by his knowledge. And that's what I'm looking for. And to the extent that you think a college degree or a high profession is going to give you the common interests, that's what people get wrong on these apps.
Right.
They have to be open to the other possibilities.
So true.
And that's getting in your own way right from the beginning.
Right. Well,
these assumptions. I'm curious, as we wrap up the conversation, what you think could make marriage less dangerous for people in the future, right? Because it comes with major financial risk, often emotional risk, difficulties with co-parenting. Like, what are some things we can build in so that it is not as scary for people who want to get married to get married?
Well, I think one of the first we've talked about earlier is that marriage should not be your primary social safety net. We as a society need to have health care. We need, you shouldn't have to marry someone to get good health care.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be dependent on somebody else's job in order for you to get time off at your job or to be able to stay home if you're a parent, so I think that we just need to invest in getting a workforce that has the ability and the security to reach out to other people and to fulfill obligations to other people, whether they're adults, children, parents, co-workers, whatever. And that means building a more egalitarian society, more egalitarian workplace. Now, it also means that we have to expect less of marriage in some other emotional ways as well, I think. That we have to make sure that, we don't expect to find all your happiness with one other person. I would say that is the most dangerous thing you can bring to a marriage, the idea that they're going to change your life, that they're going to make you happy. If you're not happy already, you're not going to have a very good marriage. So people have got to develop themselves as social beings, not develop themselves the way that the internet is telling us to do it. How much money can I get? How many likes can I get? Blah, blah, blah. But how can I develop myself as a full human being who really enjoys myself? Because then I will enjoy other people and other people will enjoy me. And, unfortunately, right now, that's one of our biggest challenges, isn't it? With the way the internet is going and the kind of value system that we're seeing right now in our politics. We have to somehow remind people that human beings are social animals and our best pleasures and most happy memories come from our giving to other people and interacting with other people, not taking from them or showing off.
Words to live by.
Yeah.
I love that. And the only other thing I would add is that there needs to really be thought in place when one person removes themselves from the workforce to raise a child, because I think that makes you incredibly vulnerable. And
it does. And it also deprives the partner from the experience of sharing that. Mm-hmm. That's the other side.
Yeah.
So, making sure you have a retirement account opened that the working partner is contributing to, potentially keeping one foot in the door in some way to have some form of income that is your own, my approach to marriage is like, hope for the best, prepare for the worst, right? And I think especially the moment you take yourself out of the workforce.
It doesn't mean that you always share things evenly. But you have to plan as a couple how to make sure that each person gets access to the joys and the burdens of working outside the home and of working inside the home, of raising children and of exploring their own capacities outside the home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, our final question that we ask all of our guests is, who is one fictional couple that you think should have gotten divorced and why?
Well, this is a very hard question for me because I almost never read novels about married couples. I mean, it's been so long since I've read one that the first thing that jumps to mind is George and Martha from Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Yeah.
But I will say this. I forced myself to read 50 Shades of Grey a few years ago. I mean, the writing was so terrible and values were so terrible that it was, I would read it and my husband would say, I bet you're never going to have sex with me again. I say, no, it's okay. I can put it aside eventually. That's a couple that should never have gotten married. And I understand they did in the last novel, and I predict complete disaster. But what's fun about it for me is that almost every romance novel they all have this idea that a woman finds a man who will adore her because he's scary, but her femininity makes him, to her and only her, be protective instead of dangerous and arrogant. To my mind, anyone that you meet that way in a romance novel, you should not marry.
That's very good advice.
I have a question. What made you finish the book? If you were like, I mean, I guess it was a big phenomenon, but I'm surprised you picked it up and you're like, I'm going to get through it. You were just...
Well, because I had, people, there was a while when I would get calls every week as a marriage historian, as someone who studied romance, and so I said, what is this about? And I would read it in bed and my husband would hear me going, oh, God. And the woman, the heroine says, geez all the time. You know? So I say, geez, and close the book, and you say, okay, I'm not getting any sex tonight.
He was so. Every other husband probably loved that their wife was reading this erotic book,
Right.
and your
He knew
husband
it
was
was
like,
gonna be bad
this
news
is
for
going to be a
him."
tough month. Go to give her a dry history book or something. Give her some academic journals.
Or something with research that turns her on.
Yeah. Give her 100 abstracts and she'll. Amazing.
Oh, well, I could talk to you literally forever, but unfortunately, we do have a time limit. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you and get your books, both the ones that are already out and the one that is coming out?
Well, my Viking Penguin did the one that the Marriage of History, and the one that's coming out in a while, and Basic Books did my first one, The Way We Never Were: American Families in the Nostalgic Trap, and of course you can go to places like Amazon, but I prefer people to buy things from independent bookstores myself.
Amazing. Thank
Absolutely.
you so much.
It was a tremendous pleasure. This was one of the funnest podcasts I've done.
Wow. That's huge
That's
for us.
amazing for us. We got to put that in a bubble quote.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to try to leave me for her.
I'm in love with her.
You're in love with her.
She
Admit
was
it.
so delightful. Look, I was already obsessed
Right.
before we got to the conversation
talking about
about
interviewing
50
her.
Shades of Grey. But that was one of the funniest things I've ever heard. Oh, God. Just reading that book. It's so funny.
Jeez. Have you ever read it?
I did. I read the first one.
What did you think?
Not much. I didn't read the second one.
Is it that bad?
I don't know. I saw the movie. You know, it was also a weird time because at that moment in my life, I looked even more like Dakota Johnson than I do now.
Yeah.
And so, like, it was a lot, like, when I was at BuzzFeed, everyone was always like, you look like the girl on 50 Shades of Grey, or like, I think I kind of looked like the way she was described in the book, you
Right.
know? And so it was hard to separate me judging this thing because I just felt cool.
Right.
I felt cool that people were, like, thinking about me.
So everyone thought you were the 50 Shades of Grey girl.
Yeah, and that was like, well, honestly, also my favorite hobby back in the day, I think it was like 2014, 2015, was observing the press tour of the leads in 50 Shades of Grey and how much they didn't like each other.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this was like a major hobby of mine to track that because there was all these interviews where it was clear that they didn't get along. And they also
Interesting.
both hated being in the movies.
Really? I didn't know any of this. I
Yeah.
just knew that it had that trailer with the Beyonce song, Slow Down, and that Dakota Johnson. I thought she looked like she had an interesting performance.
You like her.
I have a huge crush on Dakota Johnson.
Which luckily I don't find offensive at all. If
Right.
anything, rather flattering.
Right, there you go.
No, I think she like gave an interview where she was like, yeah, I mean, like, obviously, like, I wouldn't want my parents to see the movie or like my brother's friends to see the movie or really for anyone to see the movie.
Because she was embarrassed or because the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They both like seem incredibly uncomfortable with just the basic concept of BDSM, which is like the core of the book.
Right.
So it's an interesting project to attach yourself to.
Who is the actor?
James Dorian?
Sounds great to me.
What did you think of the interview?
Amazing. She's fantastic.
Did you feel like you learned anything shocking about the church, right?
Yeah,
About
I didn't know that. I
Christianity?
honestly did not know that.
So you missed that paragraph of my book
Oh, yeah, I did.
where my mom had to fact check for me. I was like, Mom, when did marriage become a sacrament? And she was like, I don't know. And then she was like, it's very confusing. and so then we just like truncated the whole religious element into like one paragraph because that was all we could adequately fact check. Yeah, shout out to my mother who was my researcher on I think, the last project we got to work on together. She did a good job.
She always did.
All right, it is time for the final segment of the show. My soon-to-be patented game show, Stay or Leave.
Oh, that was fun.
Thank you. I'm just going to get looser and looser.
Yeah.
And if you need to rein me in, let me know. Like when the Bond franchise got too silly.
Yeah.
And then they would recast and make it serious
we'll
again.
We'll reboot it so that then next time it'll be like, stay or leave. Like.
That's kind of silly as well.
Serious, you know?
Oh, but like, yeah.
Stay or leave.
I have a lot of thoughts about James Bond.
Let's play the game. When we get to episode 45 and no one's listening anymore, we can just get on the mic and talk about James Bond for a while. Go ahead.
He's supposed to be funny.
Just read the question.
Daniel Craig went too dark. Anyway, this is a show where I present you with a scenario of what might happen to us based on the episode's topic, and you decide if you would stay or leave, because marriage is a choice.
Not a trap.
Very good. So this one is a little different because it's not something I did, but it's something the U.S. government does. Okay?
All right.
The U.S. government announces that in 6 months, divorce will be outlawed, and anyone who tries to leave a marriage will be punished with lethal stoning.
Okay.
In addition, all married couples must spend every night in the same bed or face corporal punishment. However, if you stay married or choose to get married, you will receive $500K per year as part of their Make Families Strong agenda. There is 6 months to decide what to do before these new rules kick in.
Okay.
Would you stay or leave?
Wait, so
We're already married. But if we stay married, then we have to spend every night together, or we could be beaten.
Okay.
And if one of us ever wants to get divorced, we'll be punishable by a stoning death.
And we get $500,000 a year.
If we stay married.
I'm staying.
What? What if I become a monster?
I don't know, honey.
And then you're trapped with me forever.
I don't think you're going to become a monster.
What if I have to become an orthopedic surgeon?
Oh, no.
Actually, with the $500K, we'd be able to pay for
Yeah.
it.
We're substantially increasing our wealth. We just get to keep being married to each other.
You can never be apart from me for even a night.
We very rarely are apart for a night. And so, okay, for $500,000 a year, I can just make sure that we always spend the night together.
I'd leave.
That's what you would leave?
I mean, I wouldn't break up, but I would get divorced.
Wow,
Because
really?
I think it would become too dangerous to be married. The rules are too strict.
Wow.
And it would also sort of be a political statement against Make Families Strong again.
You wouldn't stay married to me knowing that we would get $500,000 a year?
What if something happens and you become a totally different person, or we fall out of love, or we face such great stress or loss that our relationship changes and we no longer want to be married, but then suddenly it becomes a trap rather than a choice.
I'm just saying there are worse things. Like, I mean, you could probably stay married to me for 10, 20 years. You'd probably kill me at one point and no one would know.
Okay, so your choice is stay married instead of divorce, we have murder.
Murder's always an option. Like if I became
that's why I'm terrified to be married to you.
If I became so awful that you couldn't be married to me anymore, you could probably just get away with murdering me. I wouldn't murder you, by the way. I wouldn't murder you.
Okay.
Even if you became awful, I wouldn't murder you.
What I see, that's
In
a
this
very
world-
suspicious thing to say.
In this world, I suspect. What, you don't find it suspicious that your husband is yelling, "I won't murder you"?
No, I said it's very suspicious.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very suspicious.
No, well, I suspect that in this dystopian world, that probably I bet there's some way you could file for divorce for the man. Probably not the woman. It's probably pretty sexist society, right? If they're enforcing these rules.
Neither one of us could get divorced. If you tried to leave me, you would be stoned to death.
I have no intention of leaving you. And so I don't know. I just feels like Feels like not a bad deal for me.
Wow. You were going to leave me in the previous episode because I painted an Animo mural and put it on TikTok.
Right.
What if I did that in this scenario? You'd be stuck with me.
Yeah, but I'd also have $500,000 to cushion the blow. We'd be sleeping on a beautiful bed that maybe I could build like a dividers or something into it.
All right. A wonderful end to a fascinating episode. If you want to submit your marriage moment, TM, or suggest an episode topic, please send an email to startermarriagepodcast@gmail.com. That's startermarriagepodcast@gmail.com.
And if you don't know what to do with your eyes, and you'd like to focus them on like some text and then move along the text and in the process of that, learn something, you should pick up Allison's book. I think, Conversations About Modern Marriage. And it's called A Reading, and you could enjoy it. Or Save the Date, which is her romcom, and both of them are something to do with your eyes.
What a ringing endorsement. Speaking of doing things with your eyes, if you wanted to watch the video version of this entire podcast, that is available at youtube.com/justbetweenus. And here's the part of the show where we desperately beg you
please
to leave a review. I mean, if you've made it through like kind of the business stuff,
yeah,
you're obviously like a true loyal listener and fan. And so if you haven't left a review yet on Apple or Spotify or sent it to a friend, I'm asking you directly, please do that. That would help our show a lot.
So much.
And finally, as we say in our home,
au revoir.